There are over 60,000 children in foster care in California, each one a victim of serious abuse or neglect. That's enough to fill every seat here at AT&T Park. With a line of children over 7 miles long waiting to get in. These children have suffered considerable trauma and now must navigate a complex and frightening system. But there are people who help, everyday people like you, who volunteer as a court-appointed special advocate.
Each year, over 500 children in Santa Cruz County enter foster care through no fault of their own because they have been abused, neglected, or abandoned. Court-appointed special advocates are ordinary citizens doing extraordinary things. CASA volunteers advocate for the safety of children in the foster care system. They speak up when it matters most, in the courtroom, in the classroom, and the community, and in the process, a child's life is changed forever. For many children in foster care, their CASA volunteer will be the one constant adult presence in their lives. For many volunteers, CASA is a life-changing experience that brings personal fulfillment as well as making a positive contribution in our community.
CASA trains and supports volunteers who work one-on-one with children who are in foster care. So they hang out with the kids and get to know them, but they also get to know everyone involved in that child's case. Their teachers, social workers, attorneys, therapists, anyone that's involved in that child's life. And with that information, they then speak for that child in court.
I come in contact with, I read files about these families that are so in crisis and about the kids who have been really traumatized by their lives. And then I meet these wonderfully open-hearted advocates, volunteers who step in and mitigate it a little bit, help out, really give the kids a chance to relax a little bit and drink hot chocolate and make art projects, and it just helps them to really have a place to forget about all that. And at the same time the advocates are playing, then they turn around and become advocates for the kids to make sure that their needs are getting met by talking with the court, talking with the social workers, talking with the school, with the therapist, whatever. I'm just so impressed.
So my experience in foster care has been, it was challenging, but I don't think I probably wouldn't have survived and been as optimistic or as energetic without her being there, because she was always there at the end of the dark light, you know, illuminating the room with, hey, you can do this, hey, you can do that, or, you know, keep trying, you know, it's okay.
And Michelle will keep trying.
Yeah.
I think the other side is what would life be like for these kids without an advocate, without a CASA? I think there's a good case to be made that some of these kids' needs would be not noticed. But if there's one advocate who is really just watching over this one child, that advocate can make sure that that one child doesn't get left behind or doesn't fall through the cracks. People listen. They listen then, because there's somebody who says, I know this child well, I spend time with him every week, I like this child. This child is not a number, this child's just not a case, this is somebody who's really special to me. I think it saved a lot of kids.
I can't imagine how different, in a negative way, it would be if we didn't have CASAs. And the fact is, we need more CASAs, because we don't have enough, and we have children who are still waiting for this gift of a CASA.
CASA works. They do truly make the difference. That one person that gives you that unconditional love and support that a kid needs and a youth needs to thrive and believe in themselves.
The volunteers that we get to work with are some of the most incredible people I've ever met. Because the role that they're taking on and the commitment that they're making is huge. Because they're investing their heart and their time. So there's not any one cookie cutter person that comes into this role and excels at it. It's someone who cares and shows up. When
you're at the part of your life where you decide to be a CASA, you You get more than you give, but you give a whole lot.
That CASA goes way more beyond than just visitation. That it's everything that a child should experience with at least one adult. Have a positive role model, whether it's a male or a woman, that they should, and a child should deserve that. They should feel that. Yeah.
Great.
You're great.
Both great.
You can make a difference in the life of a child in foster care. Volunteer today.
I had to move rooms that I was planning on doing this, so I was already anxious and nervous, but that kind of threw me off a little bit more, but this is good. Thanks for being here. So I'm going to keep my camera on, and hopefully that helps kind of get a sense of what I'm talking about. I know sometimes when I look at webinars, it's easy to tune out because I'm just looking at slides and more slides. So maybe all of my wonderful facial expressions will keep you engaged. So again, just raise your hand if you have questions. Go ahead and type in the chat window. This is our first time doing this at CASA, so at the end we'll send out a little survey, and I would love your feedback. It would be really helpful for us to know if you feel like you got the information, and if this is a good format for us to continue doing. So, you know, the benefits of coming to an in-person, obviously, are that you would get to see who else is interested in learning more. It's always a nice crowd. You know, you feel a little more comfortable asking questions or just popping right in. But please take advantage of the chat window and raising your hand. And then, as I said, I'll turn your voice on, and then you can speak that way. I've worked at CASA for almost 3 years now, so I'll just start by introducing myself. My name is Sita Rasul, and I'm the Outreach and Recruitment Manager here at CASA. So as I mentioned, I've been here almost 3 years. I have 2 young children at home. I work here full-time. I'm married, and I've been an advocate for 1.5 years, and now that's the doorbell. This is awesome. So I've been an advocate for 1.5 years. So I'm going to share some stories about my own personal experience just to help kind of illustrate some of the things that we're going to be talking about. And again, ask any questions. I will answer them really honestly. This is not a hard sell presentation. This is an information meeting where we want you to get answers to your questions and be able to make a decision that you feel good about. So I'm going to get started. We're going to see if I can make these slides work. So this is very exciting. So I'm just going to talk about CASA, tell some stories about what our volunteers do, what this role is, what the expectations are, the requirements, and then I'll talk about what the steps are to become an advocate and talk about other ways that you can help. This is not a good fit for everyone, and that's okay. So we'll talk about other ways that you can help support CASA and the children that we work with, and I'll keep making time for questions and checking that chat window. So here we go. Just a little bit of history about CASA. It simply stands for Court Appointed Special Advocates. And, you know, child welfare laws in our country were not federally instituted until the kind of early mid-70s. So one of our first dependency court judges, David Sukup, couldn't sleep at night. You know, this is a little quote from him, but I'm just going to keep talking. He was one of our first dependency court judges, and he felt like there was very little information available to him with these very dramatic decisions that he had to make for families. So he brainstormed with a group of social workers, attorneys, some bailiffs, community members, and came up with this idea of a court-appointed special advocate. So everyday people, citizens that care about children in their community, and who would speak up for the best interests of these children, go through special training to learn about the dependency court process. So one of these handouts, that's just a visual. This isn't anything you need to study or learn, but there's that dependency court timeline and the Family and Children's Services, and this is the dependency court process. So volunteers spend 35 hours to learn about what's happening, what the decisions that need to be made during that process. Also learn about what our families are struggling with. So sessions on mental illness and addiction, poverty, domestic violence, a lot of the things that our children are experiencing. And then at the end of this 35-hour training, you're sworn in as an officer of the court. So that's significant because the other people who are officers of the court in that room are the attorneys and the judge. So an everyday person who learns about these things, who also, as an officer of the court, has access to talk to the child and everyone involved in their life. So their teachers, the social workers, attorneys, therapists, their caregivers, anybody that's involved in that child's life. And then with all of that information, actually write a report to the judge and make recommendations for that child's best interest. So this is a really unique role in that you have access to everyone involved in this child's case. You read their files, and then you can talk to everyone in their lives. And you actually have real influence in the court. As an officer of the court, when you make recommendations, in our county, we're really fortunate that it's one of the first reports that our judge reads. So that's just a little bit about the history. So in '77, the first CASA program began in Seattle. This is a picture of our house in Watsonville, and this is our office. As I mentioned, CASA is a nationwide organization, but we're just one of the very few. We don't have a solid number, but that actually has a house that our volunteers can use as a resource to hang out with the kids. Because what we do is we ask you to visit and hang out with the child once a week on a regular basis. So you get to know them just doing regular everyday things that kids do. But one of the restrictions, because these are children who are dependents of the court, is that you cannot take them home and you cannot introduce them to friends and family. You can't take them to your place of work or talk about details of the case. So, so that can be a little difficult for some people. So, so we have this house. You know, I have, as I mentioned, children at home, and I don't do anything fun and special with them every week. But when I was at CASA for my little girl, we figured out cool things to do every week. So our kids live all throughout the county. So she lived up in the Santa Cruz Mountains. So we didn't come back to the house in Watsonville. We would do things downtown, do lots of fun things at the museum. But this is a resource in Watsonville because most of the children in our county that are in foster care live South County here in Watsonville. So what else is on this page? So yeah, we want you to see the kids on a regular basis and get to know them. Oh, here we go. Look at this. The uniqueness of the house I wanted to talk about. So it's a beautiful house. When you walk in, it feels like you're walking into, you know, your nice auntie's house, always clean and organized and has all the stuff ready for you to play with. So we have a beautiful kitchen that's nicer than most of our kitchens. We have a living room with video games and movies, lots of comfy, cozy toys. This is our dining area that's a craft room, and this is part of our staff that was dressed up for Halloween. So lots of nice people that you get to work with in this role, and just a beautiful space that you can you know, find things to do with the kids. I want to talk a little bit more about who these kids are and why this is important. It's kind of a fuzzy slide, but this is just some basic statistics that are pretty typical outcomes for kids in foster care. 1 in 5 will be homeless after they age out of the system. Only half are employed by the age of 24. Less than 3% graduate college with a degree. Many young parents, young dads, young moms. 1 in 4 will experience PTSD. Because remember, these are children who are dependents of the court. They have been abused, neglected, or abandoned. Oh, Gertrude has a question. Okay, here we go. I'm not sure how long this will take. So you just speak up whenever you can. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and keep talking. So these kids are victims of abuse. They've been abandoned or neglected. And so they're part of the system through no fault of their own. They have social workers and attorneys that are making decisions for them, and they don't have a lot of input about that. And clearly by these outcomes, they're not getting set up for success. Okay, did not work. PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. So it's generally associated with people that have gone to war or experienced major trauma. And so these kids, as I mentioned, have experienced trauma and been living through that. So that displays itself in lots of different ways. It could be depression, aggression, hyperactivity, lots and lots of different ways that it kind of expresses itself. So it's just something that's coming more to light. But it has long-term effects for these young people. So I hope that answers your question. So these are kind of some statewide statistics just showing the ages, and some of this information is in the volunteer handout of the orientation. But what I wanted you to see here is that half of our kids pretty much are boys and girls, and the greatest reason for children coming into the system is neglect. And generally, those cases have some occurrence or some combination of addiction, mental illness, and or extreme poverty. So those are things that we talk about in training. So just to give you a sense of Santa Cruz County, at any given time, these are numbers that change, but pretty much at any given time we have about 350 to 400 children in this system. So kids who've been abused, neglected, or abandoned, CPS and the courts are involved in making decisions for them. Right now we have just over 160 that have a CASA advocate assigned. So in our county we're assigned one-on-one, and our volunteers choose their case. So 160, I think we're about 164 or 5 now, that have an advocate, one-on-one, working and getting to know them, meeting with them about once a week, and then advocating for them in court. And our waiting list is about 25. So when you look at these numbers, we're not getting every case referred to us. We're just getting the highest needs. So this is a population with high needs, and we're just getting the highest needs from that. So, so thanks for taking the time to learn more about this. This is just an interesting image that I picked up, and it helps just really see who these kids are and what's happening. So these are children who have experienced something pretty dramatic in their homes and now have a bunch of adults that have been injected into their lives. So many of them don't understand why, because for them what's been happening in their homes has been normal. Either they feel like everyone has a life like that, or maybe they know it's a little bit different, but they don't want to disrupt things. So when they come into the system, there's a lot of adults who are asking them lots of questions about things that they're embarrassed about, that they're ashamed of, that they've maybe been told never to speak of. And a social worker's asking, and the therapist is asking, and maybe law enforcement's involved. So these are just some of the words that they use to describe how they're feeling. They might be separated not only from their parents, but maybe from their siblings as well. You know, a lot of our families, some of these stresses are from having a large family. There's 3 or 4 kids. They might not always be placed in the same home, and so you might have an older teen who was the primary caregiver, and now she's living in a group home and doesn't know where her brother and sister are living. So, you know, sometimes even though we're keeping the kids safe and trying to provide some safety and stability for them, we're sometimes inflicting more trauma on them. So when a CASA is assigned, you get to make a difference for them. So when we get to hear from our former foster youth about what they remember, what was important to them, or what advice they would give to people coming into this role, the thing that we hear over and over is that she showed up when she said she was going to show up, and she did what she said she was going to do. Simply by being consistent and caring and doing what you say you're going to do, you make a difference. You get to know them. And depending on the age and how far along you are in the relationship, I'm taking your voice back, Gertrude. The second court report I wrote with my girl, I said, I'm writing my court report. Is there anything you want me to tell the judge? And, she answered. She was 9. She was 7.5 when I met her and 9 when I was dismissed as her advocate. So when I asked if she wanted me to include anything, she said, no, I'm fine. And then about 10 minutes later, as we were driving around, because as I mentioned, she lived in the mountains. We were in the car a lot. She's like, oh, and then she just rambled on all these things about where she wanted to live, what was happening in school, and could I make sure the judge knew that she really wanted to get her ears pierced. So, we'd known each other about probably 7 months by then, and so it was neat that she trusted me enough to just say all these things and trusted that I was going to share that with the judge. One of the other things that we hear from the young people is that their CASA doesn't make them feel interrogated. Their CASA lets them just be a kid. As I mentioned, these kids have a lot of adults coming into their lives asking them all kinds of questions. When you choose your case, you get to read their entire file. What happened? What got them into the system? There might be school reports, medical reports. So you'll have access to a lot of that information, and you have access to all the people in their life. So ask them all the questions. They've already asked these kids all these questions to exhaustion, so that when you get to meet the child, you can show up and ask them, what park do you want to go to? Or, is it that you like art? Do you like to use crayons or paint? Or do you like to use clay? So you get to ask them questions about them and get to know them. A lot of times our young people just say that they just get to be a kid. We want to really consider and remind our volunteers the weight that these kids are carrying, and try to make it a little lighter for them. You're going to hold on to a lot of that weight yourself, but you're the grown-up, and you're the caring, consistent adult, so you get to help them get through this. What's next here? Please, any questions? If we were sitting at a coffee shop, I would be checking in and asking if you had any questions. So feel free. I'm just going to keep rambling through here. So when we look at some of the studies that have been done, children with a CASA volunteer are more stable while they're in foster care. They receive more of the resources. They do better in school. All of this comes from you showing up, being caring, speaking up for them. You're one adult with one child. Our social workers are totally committed. They're totally present. But they have a lot of cases that they're working with, and same with their attorneys. So you get to be that squeaky wheel for them. So the way that you can participate in them doing better in school is, asking them, how's school going? About a quarter of our advocates actually hold education rights, so they're the ones sitting at the parent-teacher conference or making sure that if they have an independent education plan that's being followed through with. Receiving more of the resources, you're going to get to know this one child so that you can call the social worker and make sure that they know that maybe the foster parent's car broke down, and so they could use some help facilitating visits with their siblings. Lots of things, lots of moving pieces in these families. So, more likely to be adopted or find permanency, you're going to get to know this young person. And so maybe you have a teenager that starts telling you about Joey's mom, that he gets to go to Joey's house on Friday nights, and his mom is so nice, and she's such a good cook, and he loves going there. That's a story that the social worker might not have any information about, and maybe you call the social worker and say, hey, have you ever talked to Joey's family? Maybe they would be willing to be placement for this kid. So just getting to know them, building a relationship and building trust, you're going to have access to information that can be helpful for them for all of these things. So hopefully this is all making sense. This is difficult. I'm used to having a room full of people nodding, so I know if we're on the right track. So the kids that we're serving are from infants up to age 21. So clearly every case is going to be different. Every age group and developmental stage is going to look really different for you. This role, whatever you're imagining, is going to be different than what you think it's going to be. It will break your heart. It will be one of the most important things you do, but it's not going to look like or feel like what you think it's going to be. So I want to be really honest about that part. So for the infants and toddlers, your weekly visits are going to be primarily supporting the caregiver, getting to know them, taking place wherever that child is living. Once they're school age, then when everybody feels comfortable, maybe you're going to start going to the park. A lot of times the first visit actually take place and happen in the home. These weekly visits, the time that we're asking you, when we look at our monthly logs from our volunteers, on average our volunteers are spending 2 to 4 hours a week. Some weeks will be more and some weeks will be less. But when we get our monthly time sheets in, that's what the time looks like. So you're going to make your schedule according to what's happening in your life and what's happening in that young person's life and their caregiver's life. So as I mentioned, it's not going to look like what you think it's going to look like. I got my case and I thought, oh, Tuesday afternoons would be great because I used to have a class Tuesdays. That's just when my family was used to me being gone. And when I met my girl, she had 3 supervised visits a week with her dad. She had a therapist visit, and she was terribly behind in school. So from week to week, we just figured it out. Some volunteers, it works out for their schedule to have a regular set time that they see the kids. But it's going to be something that you work out with the caregiver, with your schedule and with their schedule. And then let the child lead what those visits are going to look like. So we might have a lot of information or might not have very much in that file. So you're just going to get to know them. And you might also meet a child who doesn't look anything like the file that you read. So every volunteer has a supervisor, and we want you to take advantage of that. We have special in-services for all the developmental stages and age groups. So infants and toddlers, we have school age, and then transition age youth, the older teens. So after 18 in the state of California, they don't just age out. It actually is extended up to 21 now. So an 18-year-old can opt in and out of the system to be dependent of the court, receive services and support, and they can also request a CASA advocate themselves after they turn 18, and we have had a few that do that. So again, you're going to choose your case. So you might say, I grew up with 4 brothers, I would love a girl. Or, I have experience with special needs, or I speak sign language. Whatever those things are, we want you to share that with us, because that's going to come into the matching. The advocates, you have to be minimum of 21, and we have active volunteers up into their 80s. Our kids, about 49% are Latino. Less than 16% of our volunteers right now are Latino of Hispanic heritage. 52% are boys, and less than 20% of our volunteers are men. So that doesn't diminish the role that everyone else plays, but there's a particular need for us to fill there to serve these kids. So more men, more Latino, more bilingual volunteers are always needed. If you know someone, please share this role with them. The weekly visits are going to look different. So it could be really active. It could be just going to a coffee shop or hanging out at a park, coming to the CASA house and reading a book or doing homework. So one of the questions that we'll ask in the interview is, are there any physical limitations that you might have that would keep you from doing this role? And so we have volunteers that are in wheelchairs, have limited mobility, but we consider that when we're matching. So we don't want you to exclude yourself if you feel like, oh, I can't climb trees and chase her on the beach. That's okay. We have kids that just want to hang out and read a book, or maybe stroll through a garden. So make sure that if you have any questions, just let us know. Let's see, here's some of the expectations. Be consistent and caring. So there's this official role that you play as their court-appointed special advocate. You're sworn in as an officer of the court. You have access and you have influence. But again, the biggest thing that we hear from these kids, show up when you say you're going to show up. Do what you say you're going to do. When we think about who are the people in our lives that had influence, that made a difference, that made us feel special and seen, that's what our volunteers get to do. So you do that by having these weekly visits. On average, again, 2 to 4 hours a week. Some weeks will be more, some weeks will be less. At the beginning, it's generally more. You might spend 4 hours just reading their file. You might have days where you are scheduled to be in court at 8:30, but you don't get in until after 12. So those court hearings, I'm going to skip down here, about once every 6 months, and we always have staff there. So if something comes up that you can't be there, that's Lenore in the background. She's our volunteer coordinator. If you have something that comes up and you can't be there, or just doesn't work with your schedule, we always have staff there. When you are there, we always have staff there to support you. So those hearings, again, are about once every 6 months. So when you look at those timelines, the one that has this guy here, these hearings are about every 6 months. And you don't have to memorize it or learn it all. Every time I went to court, I would go to my supervisor and say, where are we in this again? So it just kind of helps you track a little bit of the information. But the important thing to remember is court's about once every 6 months. Your monthly logs help us know that you're seeing the child, who you're talking to. It could be as simple as 15 minutes sending emails, and other people will put a lot of detail on those monthly logs because they use them to help them write their reports. So again, those reports are about once every 6 months. You usually turn them into your supervisor about 2 weeks before they're due in court, so that you have time to go over them and review them. You have a lot of support in this role. We don't put you through trainings where you would give you a kid and say good luck. We want to make sure that you feel supported, that you know that you have somewhere to go to get your questions answered. So the other thing we ask you to do is do continuing ed, 12 hours a year. That's really simple. One of the things that I've talked about, and I'll talk about again, that can be difficult is the confidentiality. So remember, you can't take them home, introduce them to friends and family, talk about details of the case. So one of the ways that you can get continuing ed is to come to a group that we have called CASA to CASA, where it's facilitated by our staff. You sit in a room with other advocates who are all sworn in, who are all carrying this weight in this role. And it's facilitated by our staff, so you can talk about your case. You can ask questions. You can get advice. You can sit in a room full of people that just get what's happening with you. So the other ways to get continuing ed are lots of in-person trainings that we offer throughout the year. We have webinars, movies that you can watch, books that you can read. So getting the 12 hours is generally pretty simple, because when you get into this role, you want to figure out ways that you can help this child that you're serving. So you might be experiencing something that you don't have any understanding of, and so you want to kind of look online and see, what can I learn about domestic violence? What can I learn about addiction and a child that was born, positive talks in their system when they were born. So you're going to want to learn more about this. The hardest part for me was always just writing it down on my monthly logs. And then the other thing that we ask our volunteers to do is to commit to serving the child until their case is resolved. It could be up to 2 years, it could be longer, but on average our volunteers are assigned to their case 12 to 18 months. Wonderful. Yay. Thank you. I just saw the answers in the chat room. So thank you, guys. Are there any questions so far? I cover a lot. We want to give you a lot of time to make sure that you understand and that you feel comfortable and confident. Here's the confidentiality piece. Again, just can't take them home, introduce them to friends and family, can't publicly identify them as a foster child or dependent of the court. But I think I mentioned I would go out to the museum or walk around downtown. So you can go out in public. So then what does that look like? Talk with the kid and find out before you go out in public, if we see someone that you know or that I know, how do you want to introduce each other? Most kids will call you their friend or their auntie or a family friend. Some kids are like, you're my CASA, who cares? When you talk with your family, we want you to tell people that you're an advocate. Most of the volunteers that come to this role are here because someone else told them about it. So we want you to tell people about this so that we can serve more children. But, with my case, at one point things shifted very dramatically and very quickly. And so I told my husband, things are moving very quickly and I'm not sure what's going to happen. I'd like to be available as much as I can. I need you to pick the kids up this week. So he didn't know the details. He didn't know what was happening. But he knew that this was important to me, and it's something that we had talked about when I came into this role. So, that's how we worked it out. There were times when I called him from court, and I just said, I just need you to say nice things to me because I was stressed out and anxious about what was happening. So, it can be difficult. So, again, that's why you have a supervisor that you can work with. Our entire team of supervisors are available for you. So when you call and you need to have a question answered right away, if your supervisor is not available, ideally we'll have somebody that can help you. So we don't want you to feel like you're kind of out there on your own. Lots of support from the department with our social workers, from children's mental health, our attorneys, our judge. Everyone's really happy that you're there because you are one adult with that one child. And as much as everyone cares about these kids, as I mentioned, our social workers have a lot of cases, and on average they're seeing the families about once a month. Their social workers about their attorneys about once every 4 to 6 months. So you're seeing this kid every week. You have access to more information than they do generally. So they appreciate that you're there. Even if you're a squeaky wheel, that's your job. So we want you to be here. So yeah, the support. You have a case supervisor. We have that CASA to CASA group, continuing ed. We have a lot of support from organizations and businesses. So we get school supplies for the kids and backpacks every year. Lots of groups and churches will adopt our kids and provide holiday gifts. We have a birthday closet. There's a children's fund that our volunteers can request funds from. So you might have a child. My girl was able to take advantage of a scholarship for dance classes. But then when it came time for the recital, her costume was $150. So CASA does not expect you to pay for things like that. We don't want you to be spending your money to do all these wonderful, amazing things. We want you to spend your time. But you can request money from the Children's Fund. If you have a high school youth that really wants their yearbook, my son's high school yearbook was $110. So foster parents generally don't have the funds to pay for that, and we don't want you to do that. So you can check in with your supervisor and see if there's money available. We can also help with summer camps, art classes, lots of things just to help these kids have access to things that maybe they didn't know were a possibility for them. You get an email every week that will let you know about continuing education opportunities. We have some little inspiring words, our insights for advocates, or just some little tidbits of information. And then we also in there will let you know about free and low cost activities, excuse me, throughout the county, or if we have tickets available. Sometimes things come in last minute, so always check your email from CASA, because I think just on Friday we had a donor that walked in and just dropped off 4 Giants tickets, and emails were sent out in a flurry, and one of our advocates was able to take his CASA kid. So, sometimes things like that come across last minute, but you might also get in that email that we have, a supply of movie passes or Yogurtland gift cards or Jamba Juice. So those weekly emails are really helpful. Again, also letting you know about free and low-cost things that are happening in the community. Check us out on Facebook. I always try to put things like that on there too. Okay, I'm rambling through this, but we're almost there. So the steps to this. The next piece is a pre-training interview. So that happens here at our office in Watsonville. We are on Freedom Boulevard, across from Callahan Park on the Main Street side of Freedom. So I always say that because sometimes when people put it in their maps, it sends you through Aptos. Don't do that. Come through Watsonville. So it happens here in Watsonville. It's about 45 minutes to an hour. You're going to fill out the application that should be attached in the handouts that were in the waiting room. I can also email it. And you'll bring that completed with you. And then we're going to ask you all kinds of questions about who you are, why this feels like a good time for you to do this. We're going to ask questions about your childhood and your experience with all the things that our families are dealing with. There are no wrong answers. It's confidential. You don't need to dress up. It's just come as you are. We just want to get to know you. But we're going to ask all kinds of personal questions. So we'll do that. 2 of our staff will get to know you. We want you to ask any questions that you have there as well. And then we send everyone home for 24 hours. We want you to check in with yourself, to check in with anybody else that might be affected by this choice for you. And then we'll call you the next day. If everybody feels good about moving forward, then we will invite you to training. So that training takes place 2 nights a week, generally for about 5 weeks. One of the handouts attached was our training dates, and I'll have a slide with that too. Our next training starts on May 3rd. It'll be here in Watsonville. And then the training after that will be in August in Santa Cruz. During our training, as I said, at 6 to 9, it goes really fast. In the training, you'll hear from lots of advocates that have had different ages of children, lots of different experiences, and they'll share those stories with you, and they'll answer your questions. We have as many former foster youth as we can come in and answer your questions about what that was like for them to be in the system, to have this stranger keep showing up week after week until they figured out what you were there for. We get speakers from our attorneys, our social workers, children's mental health, specialists in addiction and substance abuse. So we want you to have access to as much information that will be relevant for you. So that happens in our training. As I said, it goes really fast. I was used to going to bed at 8:30 with my kids, and it was great. And when it was done, I couldn't believe it. So then at the end, after that training, you have a Tuesday. So in that handout that had the dates, there's a date with a circle around it. That's a Tuesday morning where you're going to go to court and observe. So dependency court is generally a closed confidential courtroom. On swearing-in day, we get special permission from everyone, including the families, for our class to watch what's happening live for these families. So you'll get there at 8 o'clock. You'll see whatever's on the calendar, so a bunch of these hearings. But because we don't know what's going to happen on the calendar on June 14th, after the morning session, you'll go for a quick break for lunch and come back, and we'll role play. Our staff, CASA staff and the staff of the court will stay, and they will role play from start to finish what these hearings look like. We'll give you a scenario of kind of a pretend family that's somewhat typical, and that way you get a sense and you can see what does all this look like. You're going to spend 5 weeks learning about it, and we want you to know where you're supposed to sit, have a sense of, how does the judge interact with the parents, and how do the attorneys interact with each other, and what does this all really look like and feel like? So after lunch, you'll come back, you'll have the mock hearing, and then you'll be sworn in as an officer of the court. During the end of training, you will select a time to come back here into the office to choose your case. So you'll come back, check in with our trainer and one of our staff, and then choose your case. From the information that you've given us, we're going to have a couple cases that you'll read. Some people know right away. They just read just a little bit, kind of when you read the back of a book and you're like, oh, this is going to be good. That's how some people are. Others want to read the whole file, maybe read a couple files, want to go home and think about it. All of that's okay. We don't want you to choose a case because you feel like you should. We want this to be a good fit for you because we want this to be a good experience for you. And that's selfish because we want it to be a good experience for the kid. So you'll choose your case. Everyone will be notified that you have been assigned. They will be notified what a CASA is and what your role is. And you're going to call and set up a time to get to know everybody. It is awkward. It does feel weird. We try to role play it in training, but this is not a common experience for everybody. And so for you as a volunteer to go into a stranger's home and say, hey, I'm your CASA, I want to hang out with you. That's weird, but that's okay. You'll get to meet your kid. Because you'll have your order of assignment. So the little piece that fell off my screen here is after you get to know the child and get to know the case a little bit more, you're going to have another meeting with your supervisor to make an advocacy plan. We want you to be intentional. We want you to be thoughtful. We want you to have a plan of what you're doing with your time. Some kids that you'll meet and everything's going to be really fun, and then you recognize that you forgot to talk to the school or check in with the doctor because there were some things on the report that you wanted to follow up with. So that's helpful to have a plan. You might have a kid that has a lot of high needs, that's moving a lot as soon as you get in, and so you're working on all that stuff and you forgot to have fun. So that's what that advocacy plan is for, and just getting that support from your supervisor. It's a nice way to check in. So here's our training dates. Coming up May 3rd to June 2nd, Tuesdays and Thursdays in Watsonville at the Hospice Conference Room. That's right off Airport Boulevard, right next to the hospital. And then that's the date, the swearing in, that happens at the courthouse in Watsonville. The next training will be in August. It'll be a Monday, Wednesday training. We did verify that it'll be at the County Office of Education in Santa Cruz, which is on Encinal, kind of over behind Costco out in that area. And then we have all of our dates ready for 2017 too. If you have other questions about that, I can get those to you. If you are feeling ready to move on to the next step, you can just type that into your browser, tinyurl.com, CASA Next Step. You will also be getting a survey that will have all of these links in it too. So, and I can send you an email. I will get this information to you however you want it. But that is the place where you can sign up for an interview. Again, it's about 45 minutes to an hour here in Watsonville. You'll get an email reminder, and it'll also have a link to the application there too. So you can fill that out online. What else? What if this is not feeling like a good fit for you? That's okay. Everybody, please tell someone about us. Our biggest limitation to the number of children that we can serve is the number of volunteers that we can screen, train, and supervise. So that's a great problem to have because it's not about trying to keep the lights on. So tell people about us. It's a few hours a week for 12 to 18 months. It's doable, it's important, and it really makes a difference. Non-advocate volunteer opportunities. In the survey, you'll have an opportunity to check that box, and I can send you a link to what those are. We always can use PowerPoint available to share. Yes, I will send it along to you. And this is recording, so my rambling, I think I'll send that link out to you as well. The non-advocate volunteer opportunities, we can always use help here at our office, again in Watsonville. help with answering the phones, either on a regular basis or whenever we have special projects coming up. We have projects that can be done at home. I can always use help with social media, lots of outreach things and other special projects that feel really random but are really important and help us get our work done. So I can send that off to you. The Friends of CASA. So when I mentioned that children's fund where you can request the money for a yearbook or the costume for the dance recital, the Friends of CASA is the group that raises the money for that fund. They help with mailings about 4 times a year. They meet, I think it's twice a year. They put on events like that luncheon that raises money. And then they also support CASA in general by organizing Team CASA. So right now we have Team CASA that's getting ready for the human race. So the Friends are the ones that are really driving that and organizing it and helping us get the word out and get people involved. So joining the Friends of CASA is an option. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, refer your volunteers, people that you think might be interested. If you belong to any groups or churches where there would be an opportunity to come and speak or have a table at an event, please let us know. Just if you suspect abuse, just make a phone call. Keep an eye out on kids and make a phone call. You might not always know what happens next, but if you have a concern, call that number, 454-CARE. What else? Thank you. Look at that. So, as I mentioned, I will be sending a survey to you. We'll also be sending a link to this. And what else? Oh gosh, please give me feedback. This is our first time doing this, and background checks. Oh, great. Yes, a thorough background check. So the first piece is getting to know you with the interview. So I'll just, I don't know if everyone can see the chat. So on your application, we're going to get information from you for references. When you're invited to training, then you'll get an email that has all the information for you to go get your fingerprints done. We'll want a copy if you're a licensed driver. We're going to want a copy of your DMV printout, copy of your current insurance, the references from 3 people that know you. What else do we do? So we do Social Security check, FBI name check. It's a very thorough check. So on that application, there are boxes for you to check that we're asking. Have you ever been arrested? If you did something when you were 20 and you think it was cleared from your record, check the box yes. Let's talk about it in the interview, because if we don't talk about it and then when we get that background check back and it shows up, we've had to dismiss people from training because they didn't check that box and we didn't talk about it. So the deal breakers with that background check and with moving forward. So the deal breakers are if you have a DUI, it needs to be beyond 7 years old. So if you had it 5 years ago, we need to wait for 2 more years before we can discuss moving forward. And I think it's in the packet too, any offenses against a child, we can't have you come as a volunteer. Any violent offenses. So I think that's it. I have to look at I can't think of the exact wording, but it kind of makes sense. If you've hurt someone, if you've hurt a kid, this probably is not a good fit for you and for us. If you got a bunch of speeding tickets in your 20s and you're in your 50s now, okay, let's talk about it. But if you've got a lot of speeding tickets and they're all within the last 3 months, we probably want to have a conversation about you putting a kid in your car. So does that help with the background checks? Great. Okay. So when you get the slides, you'll be able to click on that survey if you want to click on that there, but otherwise I will be sending it to you. I think I'm done. Thank you so much for being my guinea pigs. And I'm going to stay online here. There's my email if you want to send an email, the phone number here at the office. But I think I am almost ready to shut this down. Oh, great. Thank you, Gertrude. Let's see if this works. I'm not hearing anything. Oh, no mic. Okay. Did you have a question you wanted to type? Wow, my favorite thing about working at CASA. You know, I've worked at a lot of nonprofits in Santa Cruz County, and the integrity and the intentionality of the way that our staff works